Listen up. Here's a vague assignment on the 60s that is vaguely about something vague. Write me a 10-page paper on the topic using 3 primary sources. Go.
Wait, what?
Writing a research paper is one of the most exciting things that you will ever do.
What about rock climbing? What about eating an ice cream toast? What about washing your car?
Okay, so maybe it's not the most exciting, most fun thing you'll do, but it still doesn't have to be super stressful.
Well, then why don't you just write mine and tell me how it goes?
No. What I will do is help you get started.
Okay, I'll bite. Ooh, how do you start?
First, you have to pick a topic.
Oh, just pick a topic. It's not that easy, you know.
Thanks. Sorry about that girl. She may not be able to complete her paper, but we can still use her assignment as an example. She brings up a very important point. If you're going to write a successful research paper, you need to have a good attitude. Now, if your teacher or your professor gives you an extremely vague topic and only 10 pages to write about it, you're going to need to narrow it down in order to fully address the topic. Which brings us to step 1, narrowing down your topic to fit the assignment. Think of this part of the process as like a funnel. You start with a vague topic, in this case the 60s, and you come out with something more specific, like the impact of Kennedy's policies on the space program. Something important to remember about this process is to pick a topic that you're interested in. There are about 1 billion topics to pick from just within the 60s alone, so something should catch your interest. You'll be spending a lot of time on this topic, and you need to like it, or your paper will not be successful. This step is the only step in which you can use Wikipedia. It can be useful to look at the wiki page for the 1960s, or to look at some of the different categories that you may want to research. But you may never, ever, 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 ever again use Wikipedia or another online encyclopedia. Ever.
Now for step 2, creating a thesis. For most of your assignments, you'll be writing to argue a point, or your thesis. This thesis is not permanent. Here are some important things to remember when forming or working with a thesis. First, stay away from hypothetical situations like, without Kennedy, the space program would have never gotten off the ground. Don't try to predict what might have happened. You won't be able to find material that will solidly support it. Second, make sure you can find material to support your thesis. Remember how I said your thesis might change? Well, as you do more research, you may find that there's a better way to approach your topic, or there isn't enough material to support your thesis. A good thesis will be specific, not hypothetical, and argue a point. For example, Kennedy was responsible for the rapid advancement of the space exploration program during the 1960s.
What about all this research? And what about the library? Where does that come in?
We're getting there. When you're structuring an argument, you need to make sure you get research on both sides. Your argument will only be strong if you have support for your thesis and counter-support so that you can balance out your argument.
There are 3 types of sources that you can find at the library: primary, secondary, and tertiary sources. Primary sources are anything written by a person that witnessed an event firsthand. This can include diaries, speeches, or even articles found in a newspaper from that time period.
Secondary sources are more like journal articles or other scholarly sources that are written based off primary sources.
Tertiary sources are anything like textbooks or encyclopedias, like Wikipedia.
Which you are never to use ever, ever, ever!
Okay, so I can choose from any primary or secondary sources?
Well, not quite. You need to make sure you check the reliability of each source before you use it. Primary sources are usually okay, but you have to have some common sense. For example, if you have a newspaper article that says Abraham Lincoln was president in 1962, you're going to want to cut that out of your research. And usually opinion articles aren't the best if you're trying to have a support based on cold hard facts, but if you're looking for evidence as to what the general population thought about something, they can be useful. Secondary sources are a little bit trickier. They're hard to determine whether or not they're trustworthy and which ones aren't. You have to do some checking first.
For written sources, you need to look for 3 specific things. First, look at the author. Do they have a PhD in the field? A mathematician cannot adequately write a history analysis. Second, look for a bibliography and footnotes to show that they did their own research and just didn't write down their own opinions. Finally, is the source appropriate for your topic? If the source is too vague, like a book written on the entire 1960s, it will not provide enough detail to support a more specific point, say that Kennedy's assassination was a conspiracy.
The only really online secondary sources you should be using would be scholarly journal articles. The important thing to look at for these is that they're peer-reviewed. That means that they've been looked at by a panel of experts in the field, historians, scientists, etc., depending on what your paper is. And it means that they've all been approved by others to say that the information that they contain is valid and factual. You're looking for things that are officially reviewed by other experts rather than ones that are just put online.
But how do I find all these sources?
To the library!
There are two types of sources that you can find in the library, digital or hard copy. Hard copy will usually be books that you can take from the non-fiction section to use for your research. Digital is more like online journal articles that you can find.
Finding hard copies of books can be easier than finding online articles. Simply go to the library catalog and type in a few keywords like Kennedy and space program, and a couple dozen books will come up. You only care about the nonfiction adult books. A picture book about Kennedy's presidency is not really a reliable source. Trust me on this one.
Once you have a list of books that you could possibly use for your research, you need to find them and make sure that they qualify as good, reliable sources.
But all I see is a number, so how do I find the actual book?
That number represents its place in the Dewey Decimal System.
Can I use book without bothering with all that? I mean, I don't even remember how to use the Dewey Decimal System.
Nope. If a book isn't in the Dewey Decimal System, it isn't nonfiction, and you can't use it. And the Dewey Decimal System isn't hard to use. There will be a large section of your library marked as nonfiction, and at the end of each of the rows, there is a sign of numbers for that row. Find your row, and on each book, there's a sticker with the book numbers on it. Other books on your topic will be in the same section and may be useful.
My book isn't here! No!
Somebody else probably has your book out, or it's at a different branch of the library. You can always reserve it at those branches using your library card, and then pick it up when it becomes available.
That's right. So don't wait until the last minute to start researching. Your materials may not be available right away.
And if you're not having any luck with the hard copy, you can always try online resources. Every library is different, but the most common ones we've found is EBSCOhost. You'll most likely need to use your library card as the barcode to log in, based on your library's protocol. Once in EBSCOhost, you can see about a lot of different options. The most effective way we've found is to type in a few keywords, and most importantly, check off the box that says peer-reviewed. EBSCOhost is not the only online source available. Libraries have dozens of sources that you can use, from newspaper search engines to scholarly article engines too, to do your research, and they all tend to work in pretty much the same way. Type in a few keywords and check the results that come up. If what you type in doesn't work, try different combinations, and don't give up. There's a source out there for you somewhere.
Not all sources have peer-reviewed filter, so it's important to examine other criteria in order to make your paper as accurate as possible. All these resources can be found through your library's homepage, usually through a link that says online resources, databases, or research databases. Now, just so that this is clear, I'm going to go through every library catalog and online resources in the country so that no one can be confused. Looks like we have 121,784 more libraries to go.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun, but I have a paper to write, so bye.
While she's doing that, let me show you something else interesting about this. Every library is different, but no matter where you go, you'll be able to find what you need. Once you have all your sources and you've left the library, you need to pull the relevant information from those sources, which means you need to read, annotate, and analyze all of the books and journal articles that you're using.
But
yeah, I know, it sounds kind of like a lot of work.
it does.
But it's not necessarily so bad. Here's some helpful tips. Firstly, you want to make sure you actually read all of the material in full. Secondly, you can take notes as you read. For the online sources, you can print them off, write on them, put notes in the margins, etc. And for the book sources, you can put sticky notes in the books and take your notes on those. The third and most important point is that whatever you do, make sure you do not plagiarize. You can take information from the sources, paraphrase them, or even use direct quotes, but any information that's not your own has to be properly cited.
Wait, citing? How do you do that?
Well, there are some different styles of citation, usually either MLA, APA, or Chicago, and your teacher or professor might have a preference for one over the others. Regardless though, if you have any questions, just make sure you use the OWL Purdue website, or ask a teacher for help.
Well, I have all my information, so now what?
Depends on the assignment. The first steps are usually the most complicated and the hardest. But once you get those out of the way and you really get into the flow of writing your paper, it'll all flow pretty smoothly, and you'll end up doing a really nice job.
Wait, so you're abandoning me?
Well, you could think of it like that, or you could think of it like I gave you some great advice and you're well on your way to writing the best paper you've ever written. Good luck. And whatever you do, make sure that when in doubt, talk to a teacher or librarian, because they always know what to do.
Alright, so the first 100 we went through was just New Jersey. Now, on to New York.